All right, good morning, y'all.
Good morning.
Thank you for meeting me for the look back, as we do every single Thursday. But last week we planned to reteach 6.7a, and we went from 69% of students meeting grade level standard to 78%. So great work, guys. That's awesome. So I'm wondering, what actions did we take to reach this goal?
Well, I think that the look forwards definitely help breaking down and identifying possible misconceptions or the steps we need to address for different details of solving problems really help for planning.
Absolutely. And specifically in the look forward, what do we create that helps us to identify what students need?
The
The no-shows. So do you guys think it's been helpful to create those no-shows to help us understand exactly what students need to be able to know and show?
Yes, it also helps us address misconceptions that could possibly be there instead of waiting until after.
I also think it's been really helpful to identify the aggressive monitoring labs so you guys are able to implement those within Monson. So you guys have done an awesome job. So today I want to narrow our focus and to dive into 6.7D from our Power DOL last week, and specifically assessment item number 1, because that was the lowest, even though all around the 6th graders did an amazing job on that. So we already have our no-show created from the look forward, but I wanted us to go ahead and take 1 minute to reflect on what we have in the no-show and figure out if there's anything that we need to add to figure out what students need to know or show to demonstrate mastery. Anything that we would need to add. And you guys have it on your paper as well. Well, that pops back up. So 1 minute to reflect. Is there anything that we need to add?
It's going to go away.
Just analyzing the no-shows or anything we need to add to the no-show chart right now.
I just noticed vocabulary variable. I don't see variable on there. I'm
Okay.
going to miss it.
So I'll just add it for here. Anything else that we need to add? And this is just analyzing our no-show that we've had so far. Good? All right. So now I want us to go ahead and review the teacher exemplar. So go ahead and get the teacher exemplar out. I'm going to give you 1 minute first to analyze independently, and then 1 minute to share out. What were the keys to an ideal answer, and is there anything that we would add to our chart based off of that answer? So first minute, just analyzing the exemplar, and then we'll see what we need to add to our no-show chart based off of the exemplar. And at this time, going ahead and sharing out.
I noticed multiplying with fractions.
So would that be under the show?
The show, yeah.
That was something that I noticed as well. Anything else?
Just simply setting, would you still even say just knowing that a whole number is represented as 1, the number of the 1.
So knowing whole number is represented over 1. Anything else?
Dividing a fraction to convert it to either a whole number or decimal.
So, over or under show? Or no?
I'm sorry. So dividing, so like in this particular example, they had to divide the fraction to turn it into a decimal, so it's easier to add it to the whole number with the decimal.
So that would be something that you'd want them to show.
Oh, got you.
Yes. So asking if you'd want them to know or show.
Got you.
So dividing a number to convert it to decimal.
Yes.
Can someone go to 10 and stop that timer? Thank you. And that was something that I picked up on as well. Dividing a number with decimals as well, because we still see kids pulling down the numbers and they're putting the decimal in the wrong place still. So I think that that's definitely a really important one. Anything else you guys want to add?
I put on mine labeling PIMDAS on the show because I have the kids number P as in 1, E 2, MD 3, A S 4, and then they label it, and then from there they know what order to go.
I saw you doing that in your room. I thought it was really cool. So yeah, I think that labeling PEMDAS. One thing that I also noticed, vocabulary substitution in general. We're telling them to substitute, making sure that they've heard it, but that we're uploading them to the academic language for substitution as well. Anything else that we need to add to our no-show chart at this point in time? Okay. All right, yeah. I mean, I know we established a lot of it, but to make sure when we want to identify that gap that we're adequately prepared. So now going ahead and taking out the student exemplar and putting it next to the teacher exemplar. Let's go ahead and take 1 minute to compare them and analyze what is the gap between the student exemplar and the teacher exemplar. And I'm going to put a star next to those pieces on our no-show chart. Go right ahead. 1 minute to analyze, then we'll share out. Some questions to consider. Does the student have a different path to mastery of the standard? Something to consider. And then, does the student exemplar actually offer something that the teacher exemplar does not? 34 seconds to independently reflect. Great, let's go ahead and start sharing it out. What gaps are we seeing in there that we can identify on our no-show chart?
I mean, I tried to do it, but I forget as I'm demonstrating sometimes. They really use their PEMDAS as a checklist, but as I was doing each problem, I did it on the first problem. And
so kind of like how she said labeling PEMDAS, PEMDAS checklist. So that right there. Mm-hmm. Any other gaps we're seeing?
I guess just really on mine. My students got the question right, but they didn't check the work, which is the last step they needed to do. So they didn't check the work by substituting the variable for 2.
So substituting the variable with a number?
Yeah, that was the checking the work they did.
So that's one thing that we're seeing in there. Anything else? Any gaps we're seeing between the student work and the teacher exemplar? Showing their work. So where would you find that on here? Which part would that stick most with?
Applying, would you say applying order of operations?
Applying order of operations. Yep. Anything else before we wrap up that piece? Anything that we see they're missing? This was the lowest question, but overall.
That was my fault. I guess on the no and show is adding like terms.
Adding like terms?
Yes, it's not.
So we should. Do we want to go ahead and add that right now?
I think that's something that they need to know.
They need to know or show.
I think show is adding like terms to your show.
Hey, we come across things at different times. All right, so now we're going to transition to the student work that is representative of most of our students. So not the exemplar, but the medium sample. So going to the unmastered student work, looking at who did not master that work. who do you think would be most representative of the students who did not master the work? Look at that one, who you think would be best for the reteach. So we're going to take 2 minutes. Take that first minute and identify what's the gap between that student work and the student exemplar. So I'm going to give you 1 minute to do it independently, and then 1 minute we'll share out. We'll see where it's on there. Okay. So go right ahead. Great, let's go ahead and start sharing out. What is the gap between that representative student sample and the student exemplar?
The representative, I know for mine, they didn't label like all their stuff.
So the labeling of PEMDAS?
Yeah, it's like they kind of like stopped halfway and just kind of like did it but didn't label it.
So that intentionality behind the labeling. Anything else?
Mine didn't set up the multiplying the fractions correctly.
Okay.
The big problem for me was the understanding what to do with the fraction.
Okay, so almost like a rational numbers piece, going back and evaluating that. Anyone else?
Yeah, my students set up the fraction correctly, so they understood the fraction sentence, but they didn't. The fully fraction sentence is that like 30 over 5. They didn't understand what that was, I guess.
So yours is a fraction piece as well.
Just the basic, I think it's just the basic. Mine is more just basic, right? Not the
Division.
That a fraction represents division.
Right.
Ooh, do we have that?
That fraction.
Literally.
So knowing a fraction represents division. All right. So now that we're seeing that, and that's why it's good for us to go through this process and be able to see that, what are our key misconceptions? And when we think of the know, we can think about what is the conceptual, and then over here, like what is the procedural? What is it that they need to know that they didn't have the first time? What do they need to show that they didn't have? So what key misconceptions are we seeing on both sides? Fraction represents division. We're all in agreement with that?
Yeah.
This fraction as a whole, too.
I see a fraction.
Yeah, seriously.
And then,
And that a fraction. can
so
be
fraction
divided.
rules, essentially fraction rules. And then as a whole as well. Anything on this side as we're seeing as a key misconception?
Multiplying and labeling.
So labeling PEMDAS and then multiplying with fractions. So looking at this, what do we think that the highest leverage piece, our key area that we need to reteach is? Is it going to be the labeling PEMDAS or fraction rules and multiplying with fractions? All right. So I totally agree because it's a conceptual that's leading to that procedural piece. So our key area to reteach is making sure that students understand that fraction rules, such as fraction representing division and fractions as a whole, and that they know how to multiply and divide those fractions. So what is our key area to reteach? Fractions, the rules and the operations associated with that. So I have those pieces circled on the chart. So I want us to go ahead and think for a moment. I know that we've discussed before whether or not this is something where we could use modeling or guided discourse. So why don't we go ahead and take 30 seconds to reflect on whether or not, independently, whether or not we think this should be modeling or guided discourse so we can engage in that conversation. So are we thinking that it should be modeling or guided discourse?
Well, I almost feel like this could be hit during a do now or do nows. Because it's a
Well, I want you to think like you have the blended learning groups.
Mhm.
And I would say guided discourse is definitely going to be the highest leverage because the percentage of students who didn't get this problem correct was still a pretty low percentage of students. Like the kids did well on this DOL. This is where our look back was this week. I'm like, all right, this is awesome. So thinking about when you have this and it could be like within that small group, what would be the most appropriate? Modeling this or guided discourse? Guided discourse. Why do we think guided discourse would be the most appropriate in this situation?
I think it's good. It's something that they have seen before, so they have some recollection of it. They just really need more examples of it. If they see their peers work or some examples related to fractions, that they'll can talk about it and understand it.
I absolutely agree because there is a really high amount of student work that they could utilize. Like it could be a quick review of the rules, but then there's a lot of student work that they could look at to see how that they're applying the fraction rules by multiplying and dividing, so that they can address their misconceptions. So I definitely think guided discourse is the way to go. And then what is the ideal answer that we want to see that'll show that we've closed the gap for those students then? What will we see in those students' work that'll show that we've closed the gap for students?
proper use of multiplying or dividing fractions and being able to solve for the answer.
Could we also just rewrite this question and present it as a DOL after the guided discourse?
Absolutely. The thing is, we want them to be seeing those same aligned questions to determine whether or not they remastered it. Absolutely. That would make perfect sense. So we would see mastery of this problem with them accurately applying fraction rules and evaluating fractions through multiplication and division. So now that we've decided that it's going to be guided discourse, we can go ahead and practice writing our script, so that way we can do a show call and get some practice out. I would say think about how can we write this script you doing a show call using that student exemplar. So go ahead thinking right now. We're all going to go ahead and write our script for the show call. And I will do the same so that way we are able to compare. So I'm going to give us about 5 minutes to go ahead and script. Ensuring that the script is just really focusing on the fraction rules too. Punching that point. begun. We have a little over 2 minutes left. Thirty seconds. Get as much done as you can. Alright, let's go ahead and start comparing our reteach plans, or do we feel like we still need another minute? Feel good? Like I said, we're focusing really just on the fraction piece for right now because that's where we saw the biggest misconception with the multiplication, but really punching what that would look like. So why don't you go ahead and partner up Cash and Baron, Tori and Richard. Go ahead, I'm going to give you 2 minutes to share your plans with each other. I will put mine in the middle at the end of that. And then that way we'll be fully prepared to be going into our practice. So 2 minutes, go ahead and compare. Okay, get started.
So after, so then I'm going to simplify the expression in the word problem. Using PEMDAS, I see that there isn't any parentheses or exponents.
Like I
so
don't have
can
them
cross
do
those
this,
off.
they label like their steps like this. I call them the PEMDAS skills.
I can see that there's multiplication and division, so I'm going to do that
circle,
next.
go to your
To
first
multiply a whole number with a fraction,
and
I
so
first need to turn my whole number into a fraction by putting it
but then you see that
Then I multiply
Yeah,
straight
whole number
across
and
to get my fraction answer.
so what do you do if you have a
Then I rewrite the rest of the problem
because we know, and so then I remind them
so I don't miss a step.
and then
Now
if
remember,
it's
a
two
fraction
fractions,
just
you're just
represents
gonna
division.
multiply across.
So I'm going to use 9 to divide my numerator by my denominator. Once I have the answer of 9 from 9, I'm not forget to add my 2 still. So I need to add my 2 to what I got from 9.
So for 9 would be the same thing as 9 over 1. And then you put a numerator. So
Sure.
like even an average number like 1005
everything you said except for
1005
until,
is equal to
like a whole
1005
number is
So
1
we're going to go ahead and
because
rewrite
anything
this
divided by
part
1
of the
is
expression
itself,
as 9
and a
over
fraction is a
1
division
times
problem. So
3 and then
9 divided by 1
multiply
is still 9, so just change
7
it.
and then
Now we can multiply
it will be
the fractions together.
denominator will be 1 times
So we have 9 over 1 times 3 over 4. So multiply across. 9
So-
times 3 is 27. 1
So
times 4 is 4.
We're 20 seconds.
Now we have y
when
plus
that's
27 over
multiplying
4.
the fraction,
Now we can
I showed
see
the kids
if
to say,
y plus
okay,
27
if I
over 4.
divide this,
Um,
we remember how we
are the
convert
same
fractions
terms.
into decimals.
now,
How
can
do
we
we
add
convert
y
fractions
plus
into
27
decimals?
over
I go
4?
back to our supplemental A with our
No, we cannot because they are different
we
terms.
divide it.
So you cannot add
So the
terms that are
same
We're going to
different.
add 30
How
seconds.
would you
Just
do
We add terms that
How
are
do I do
alike.
the whole number?
So because y swapping the variable for the number 2.
So I can divide by
So
1.
we're going to
And I
add
prove that. So I say,
y
hey,
plus
let's see
2.
it. So if I
I
can
mean,
divide
sorry, 2
9 by
plus
1,
27 over
I
4.
still get
And now we're doing times
So
first.
that means I can just do 9 over 1 times 3 over 4.
Yeah, so it's really
Then when I go to rewrite it, I'm going to rewrite it.
yeah, like terms. Like I does a
A
lot.
lot
So
of kids
they did all this. They just love
don't
it.
realize you go across.
That's what my high
So
school
I
did.
combine my
They
numbers.
just check the work by making sure.
Combine my
So they
numbers.
Bringing
eliminated
it back together.
answer choices.
One thing I wanted to show you, and I have it written right here because I just wanted to emphasize that piece, because it's a big area of growth that I'm seeing in our department, making sure we're not answering all the questions for them, but like prompting them to answer. So why did student A put, and I'll just let you guys go ahead and do that first if you want. If you can, if something doesn't make sense. Sorry. Putting.
Okay.
Sorry. I know my handwriting. The reason I'm having you look at like that scripting piece is also like making sure that when we're guiding them through it, that we're explaining the why and punching those specific fraction pieces as well. Like why are we putting 9 over 1 because 9 is a whole number, so that they're really punching those pieces. So and then like also now what can I do with the 9? I can multiply it with this because that now I can multiply fractions. I have to put it over 1 and make it a whole number. So is there anything that you need to add in terms of like prompting questions or anything to your script before we get into practice? Anything you want to do to punch key points?
I guess my scripting was more demonstrating than, and we did say guided discourse, so that's more guiding.
So
asking.
I'll go ahead and give you like 30 seconds trying to think what are those questions that you can ask to punch those key points from the fraction rules that you want to. Because I know we want them to hold the cognitive load. So think, what are some questions you want to ask and practice? So that way you're having them hold the cognitive load. So you want to script those questions that'll reiterate the key points addressing our misconception. Remember, you don't want to walk them through it. You want to guide them through it. And guiding them means asking them questions to affirm those pieces that might be missing. So, because I know we only get 40 minutes to meet together, I want to make sure that somebody gets the opportunity to model and get feedback. So I'm going to have us partner up. You're going to choose one person who's going to model how they're going to do that guided discourse piece, and then the other partner will give them feedback, an area of strength and an area of growth. And then we will finalize what are we going to see this reteach in action, when will we reevaluate the data. And I am just going to sit with you both, this too, and give you feedback as well, and I might do real-time coaching as well, just so you know. All right, but yeah, I'm going to set the timer, so that way we have 4 minutes to go ahead and practice, and then we will finish up. All right, go right ahead.
Who's going? I want to see the left turn.
Go ahead.
All right.
Oh yeah.
So our problem is write some expression y plus 9 times 3 over 4, which expression is equivalent to the one originally right. So if we have this problem, what are
Well,
we
yeah,
going to
so
circle?
I guess I'm asking if you could model.
I'm going to circle 9, 3 over 4.
So okay. So when we do pindoffs here,
All right. What are our options that we're going
we
to
don't have any
underline?
parentheses.
Expression is
Now you have multiplication for division. Multiplication for division.
Question.
Now we have right here is 9 times 3 over 4. Okay.
So
Now
what are we
I can see
writing
a letter
for the
that
value?
right, but we
Can
need
we
to go
order
letter
the stuff
alone
over
because
the
that is
And what
different.
methods are we
These
going to
numbers
use
over here.
to get our
We're not
answers?
doing y ties.
Who
What's 100 times x?
And why are we using
Okay,
PEMDAS
awesome.
for this?
So we can multiply
Because we see
variables
multiple
and numbers.
operations in
We
the
can't
problem.
have
Exactly. So whenever you see more than
y
one
is
operation
yams.
in
Okay,
an
let's say
expression or
it's yams
equation, you're
plus
going to use
oranges.
PEMDAS.
If I have 1 yams
And
and
then
9 oranges,
also,
how many yams
how
do I have?
about the way we're going to
So
set it up?
yams,
How are we going to
exactly.
set it
They're
up?
different, so we can't have them together.
Yes, we're going to use
Same thing
four
with variables. So what we can do is we can do 9 times 3
All right,
or 4,
so
because they're both
You set up
numbers.
our four corners.
now,
That means
What
you
we're going to do is
designate a space for
we're gonna
all,
turn that
or
9
in
into a
this
fraction.
case, it's 3 corners, so
So
we
how
have
do we
3
do
answer choices. So we designate a space for
we
all
would do
3
that. I'm gonna put 9
expressions.
over
Now, are we going to go through and simplify
What does that
A,
represent?
B, C, or we're going to
It
simplify the
represents
one
a
from the
fraction.
problem first?
I need to simplify the one problem
We're going
first.
from the problem
a
first.
fraction. is
That's
a
where I would
math
say after that,
operation.
ask why.
Okay.
So that way you're pushing that understanding.
You guys-
So
now we
why
know
would
that
we simplify the
number
one from the problem
is
first?
a fraction, but it's also
To
a division
find
problem.
what we're looking for.
We can always
So
put
that we
one
know what we're looking for, because we don't want to
under
waste all our
every
time
command, because
simplifying A,
9
B, and C.
divided by 1
When they
is still
might
going to
be
be
A
9.
or B.
So 9
So we're going to
is the
simplify
same
this
thing
one
as
so we
9.
know exactly where
That
we're
does not change anything.
So
So we can always put a 1
we have
under
y
any whole number.
plus
So let's go and
9
multiply 9
times 3
over 1
over 4.
times 3.
What number did we say we're going to use
Now,
to
we can multiply
substitute the
together.
variable?
So 9 times 3.
We're going to use 2. So we have 2 plus 9 times
y
3
plus
over
27
4.
That would be another
We
point
can
where I'd be
do-
like, so why are we
There's
using
2
two?
things we can do.
So,
One,
and I
we
know
can
it's
turn
like,
a fraction
you want them to
into a
understand
decimal.
exactly why you're
Because
using
now that we know
that,
that the
because
numerator
one
on the inside
doesn't know
is
what's
not that side, and that's going to give us a number. Okay?
Alright,
And there's
so
nothing
we're
we can
going to
do.
go ahead and
It's
set
just
up our
let
PEMDAS
it be.
skills.
The reason why
So what
Because
letter is going to
y
go in the first
plus 27 over 4.
circle?
You
First
cannot
circle.
add those two things together because
And
they
for
are different
multiply.
terms. If y
And y
is
multiply
yams.
first.
and number are oranges, you
We
cannot
have
add it
addition
together.
too.
They are different.
So
You
why
cannot
are we
add
going to
it.
multiply first?
The y becomes a letter
M comes before the
and
N.
the
Yes,
fraction
in
becomes a number.
PEMDAS.
So you have letters
And
and numbers.
M
You
for
cannot add
multiply
together.
comes before
So we
addition.
cannot add these
We're
terms
never
because
going
they
to
are
have a situation where
So
A
what we're
is
gonna do
before M.
is we're going to work out these
So we're going to
problems.
multiply. So we have
We're going to work out these problems to see
9
which one is going to
times
be the exact same as the
3
one
over
we
4.
have.
Okay.
So
So if we
Oh,
were, we're going to multiply a whole number and a fraction.
so
So
right here is when we leave
if
it
we're
alone.
multiplying two fractions together, how would we do that? If it was two fractions, so let's
So-
say it was 9 over 2
Solve the problem.
times
So
3
we
over
end off
4.
on pain. Now, we have a letter.
You go from
Can we still
Yes,
do this
exactly.
problem?
We're going to go
Yes,
across.
we can. Awesome, because we
We
have numbers
multiply the
together.
numerators together.
Yeah, they
9
are
times
different.
3, we have 27.
We can
And
add
then we don't multiply the
And
denominators
then we'll go
together.
to it, right? So
2
we'll do
times 4, and we have 8. But in
So
this
3 divided
situation,
by
we don't
4.
have two
What is 3
fractions.
divided by 4
So what are
represents?
steps that we can
Division.
take
But what is
to
division also
turn this
represent?
9 into a fraction?
I could put it over
So
one.
it's gonna go
We
on
can
top.
put it over 1.
The
Why
3
would that work?
over 4. Okay.
I think that would work,
3 over 4.
um,
And now,
because
all we're doing is
now it
just
makes it
rewrite
so that
our
they're
problem.
both fractions. And
Now,
right now it's
we
just a
have
whole
an
number.
operation, so we can
Exactly. So remember, every
Now,
whole
we
number
cannot
is
add
the same thing
like
as
terms.
itself
Also,
over
but can we
1.
multiply?
And that would be a
I'm not
really
sure.
good point right
Also,
there,
yeah,
where you could be like, because it's what, and have everyone repeat whole number and use choral response
What's 50
for
times
questions.
100 over 50? What's 100 times X?
No, I really like it. It was good.
You tell me.
You
It's
can
100 X.
also
You didn't say 100 plus X. So
Mhm.
you can multiply.
I love that,
letters
Mr.
and
Richard.
You can multiply.
All right, y'all. I want to be respectful to your time, and I know that this is short, and we had a good piece to get through. But I'm going to say what's one glow and one grow you have for Mr. Barron?
I like that. So for adding like terms and then not being able to add like a number with a variable, he used real world problems. So like yams and oranges, they
Oh,
still
cool.
say as yams and oranges, you can combine them. They're different things. I thought that was kind of neat.
Awesome. One glow or grow.
One grow, and it could have been for time. So he did identify that you could divide the fraction, but he also identified that you could leave it alone. I do have some kids that would need to actually see that this number matches this number to see that they're correct, rather than just rely on the plus y. But it's good that they can identify that if it's plus y, they can leave it separate, or they have to leave it separate.
I want to shout out Miss Poirier for she was implementing the real-time feedback like right away. Like I was telling her to ask them why now and the how behind it, and she did that right away without prompting. After 2 prompts, And then I really like these little PEMDAS Skittles. My push, really identify what are the vocab, so you can put the choral response behind the vocab, and then really scripting out when you want to ask why and how to reinforce understanding.
And I also would implement the PIMDOS again before you do the skills.
Okay.
So like have them
So
rewrite.
they understand that why you're putting the M here first.
What day are we going to be reteaching to these students, do we think? Okay, I know that they suggest 24 hours, but we know we have more readiness weeks coming up, and we just transitioned from 6 weeks. So I'm just going to be looking for that in your IPC, and we'll review that data when we do the look back for that specific piece. But we're going to transition. All right, Miss Cash, I'll be right back for all this stuff. Thank you.
Yeah, so number 3.
You guys.